Welcome back, everybody, to the Casual GM podcast. I'm your host, Drew, along as always with my co-host, Mike. Mike, how are you?
Just as handsome as ever, Drew. How about yourself?
Well, I would certainly never dare to compete with you in that particular category, but we have a challenger for you on today's show, and that is Matthew Turner from Roar of the Lions UK. Matthew, welcome.
Cheers, Drew. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm actually extremely appreciative of the fact that you were so gracious enough to come on the podcast with us today. And I have had a bevy of questions for you ever since I discovered your channel maybe 6-7 months ago, where I've had the opportunity to pop in occasionally and listen to you guys talk about football. But I'm basically, let's just start off with some really, really basic questions. Who are you and where are you from? Because it's not where I'm from.
It's not where you're from. I'm from Bristol in England, and I'm 32. I'm a chartered accountant by trade. I've followed the Lions since 2009, so I'm a fan of 13 years. Saw Stafford get picked, played Madden that year. Also picks the Lions on the kind of play now bit, and sort of kind of just started following them through that, which was like the main driving factor to begin with. And then you learn more about the city. And I mean, there's a whole wealth of reasons why the Lions, but that's kind of in brief my background. I don't know if you want to ask more specific questions about all of that, but sure.
So yeah, I do actually.
I gotta ask though, Drew.
Oh, okay,
I'm gonna cut you off because I'm prettier than you. But why the Lions? Yeah. I mean, 2009. That was coming off our 0-16 year. I mean, if you're gonna I'm gonna get into this American football thing. Who should I root for? Oh, that sad lot right there that just went through an entire season without winning. That's where I want to put my fandom. Like, what made you come to the Lions?
I mean, obviously, in the first year, it's not like I'm kind of entirely sold on being one team. Like when you're first getting into the sport, you are kind of just watching it as a neutral. But I was keeping an eye out for this team, and so I kind of start the counter there. But maybe it's a bit soon for saying I was a fully sold fan at that point. My whole philosophy on what it means to be a fan of a team is that you earn your fandom. Like you earn the right to have happiness through it. And so, if you started supporting a soccer team 10 years ago, you might well, if you want to have a very happy life, be a Manchester United fan because they just won everything for so long. And very much over here in the same mantra, maybe 40% of people over here are New England Patriots fans. It just happens that way because glory hunting is a real thing. People want to win all the time. And it's just so easy to pick the winning team because then you're never sad. But it's just not true. Like every win you have, if you buy in at the top, every single win you have is empty. Like it's expected. If you lose, you're angry. And if you win, you're merely just okay because that's what you wanted anyway. And I take the complete opposite kind of viewpoint to that. It's potentially it's an overreaction to that viewpoint. I'm like, through adversity, you earn your fandom. So if you take the team at the very bottom and you support them through that, through thick and thin, that when that team comes good, you've earned the right to be just as happy as the people are who come from that place. So my soccer team is Liverpool, and I'm 3 hours away from that city, which in American terms is not that much, but in British terms is about as far away as you can get. And I don't have any professional soccer team anywhere near me, but I felt a calling to them. And when I started supporting them, and they were a big team in the past, but when I started supporting them, it was probably at their lowest ebb too. And so that kind of through the adversity of both of those teams, I feel like I've earned the right to be happy. And I feel like actually that's coming with Detroit right now. So kind of that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is just the city in of itself. If you have a look at New York and LA as maybe the two glam cities of the States, maybe Dallas too, probably not.
We
But
don't wanna
LA
talk
and New
about
York.
Nothing from Texas.
But so New York City, it's the Big Apple and whatever, but like it's huge and it's like London. No one's got any time for each other. Everyone's kind of unfriendly as a sort of reputational thing, and there's lots of money there, but the locals really can't afford to live there anymore, so they're moving away. And I don't know, there's just some sort of fickle nature to it all. It just seems to me. And LA is just, I've never felt connected to that city. I like the idea of California. Like, it just sounds quite nice to me. But no one city really calls out to me. Maybe San Francisco more than LA. I kind of fancy myself as it's a bit of my personality. But Detroit, it's a hardworking blue-collar city, much like Liverpool is. The people there are deeply passionate about all things sport, and that's through thick and thin. Obviously, there's been success for the Lions in the 50s and the Pistons all the way through their existence, pretty much. And it's the hockey town, so it's got a big connection to sport, which I appreciate. And then if you're a student of history, you know that Detroit was the richest city in the world in the 40s and 50s, and people of my age really have no idea about that. Detroit was the capital of the world for a while. And kind of you have a look at Central Station, which is being renovated at the moment by Ford, and just how beautiful that building is. And what's happening now with this city. And I went to Detroit in November for Thanksgiving, and to meet some of the people there who are absolutely floored that I would go there to watch the Lions. It blows them away. And it makes me feel appreciative to go. Because if I went to watch the Giants play at MetLife, they go, "Oh, you're British. Okay, that's cool." Yeah. Whatever. I don't care who you are at all. But Detroit people just have a humbleness to them, which is almost British. And I like that.
It's an interesting dynamic, being a former shining city, and then it
not as shiny,
fell on rough times or whatever. But yeah, it's if you want a team in an area that has gone through adversity and whatnot, you came to the right place. I mean, we're giving you the adversity that you're looking for, and it's some highs and lows, but
adversity.
We've had two good seasons since I've started supporting the team. 2 good seasons. So
you could say adversity's been the city of Detroit's #1 export here for maybe 15 or 20 years. So I guess I have one more question before we jump into the kind of more business side of the discussion today. So, like, as someone who grew up in Michigan, we love to do this. Our state looks like a mitten.
Yeah.
So we'll go like this, and we'll go, "I'm from here.
I'm from here, and I'm going to go over to here.
Oh, I'm from over here. I'm from up here, or whatever." Like, so you said you're from Bristol. Where in Britain is that?
So I think that England also kind of looks like a boot. So it's kind of like I don't know if it's that way around. So like you've got like, hang on, I need to see where my camera is, like that. And you've got like Cornwall and Devon down here, and then London is more like there. You've got Manchester and Liverpool kind of up here. Newcastle's over here, and Bristol is about there.
Okay.
So I'm kind of near the coast and some of the beaches that we have over here. About 2 hours west of London, 3 hours south of Liverpool, Manchester, sort of orientation-wise.
That's so cool. In my household when I was growing up, my mother and now my sister have been obsessed with the British monarchy and British television since I was born, So so I grew up with a ton of BBC inspired programming. So I feel maybe an above average connection to Britain. So I've never been, but I've always liked to go. So let's talk a little bit about your channel. So it's Roar of the Lions UK, which my first question then is there a Roar of the Lions US?
No. So I kind of named it in the beginning when it was just me. And then we decided as a group to form a podcast, which was going to be unrelated. And then we couldn't think up of a name. So I was just like, why don't we just donate that name to this thing? So kind of by osmosis, it became that. And I'm open to changing the name, actually, if people want to do that. But the reason that I called it UK at the end is I knew that there's some sort of Anglophile section of the US, right? There are just some Americans who love the British, and there's a good section too who really don't. But I thought, you know what? If people are going to listen to us, then they're going to have to like the British accent anyway. So if I piss off the guys who don't like the Brits, then that's fine. I don't care. But you've got to, in terms of the audio podcast, which is what we were doing to begin with, you've got to kind of go up against Pride of Detroit. You've got to go up against The Athletic and, all the other kind of bigger players. Mm-hmm. And how do you stand out by name? Like, that's really hard because you want them to find you if they're searching for Detroit Lions. But you also want them to want to watch you because of some other aspect of it. And so putting UK in the name distinguished who we are from everyone else. And it does make it seem like with the UK variant of a US podcast, okay, that's fine. I don't really care. It works. And I think it is a reason why some people would come and listen to us. We did a little feedback form recently. We didn't get too many replies, but a couple of people said, love that you're British and love the sport. And so that kind of confirmed to me that we were doing the right thing.
Cool. That's great.
Is American football pretty big over there, or are you kind of in a minority?
Definitely the minority, but it's the fastest growing sport in the country. And that sounds impressive. I think the only reason that could be true is because it's coming from a low base and it's accelerating quickly. You couldn't say that any other sport that had a big following was accelerating quickly. So in that, it's already low and it's getting bigger. But you've got the Super Bowl being watched by... So the population of the country, including like really young children, is like 75 million. And I think like 8 or 9 million people watched the Super Bowl last year on... It's the only game of the year that's on the free-to-air channel, the BBC, as well as the paid-for cable channels. So the ability for everyone to watch it kind of helps. But that is, I think, probably 25% of adults, which is pretty good considering that it isn't a very big sport here. So, yeah, it's been increasing year on year for the last decade with increased programming, and the games being played over here a few times a year really, really helps. So it's really exciting to see, and there's lots of people looking for a new team. And that's kind of partly what we're trying to do as well, is convert our fellow kind of Brits who are on the fence about who to support to come and support the Lions.
Yeah, we had an exchange student from Germany for the last school year, and he came over, big football fan. He actually plays American football in his town, and he was a Chiefs fan.
I was shocked that they had American football at a high school level.
Yeah, and I guess
the Germans are massive. It's huge in Germany. Like,
really?
Yeah, it's so people think that it's massive in England because of the number of games that are played here. But I think the reason why they came over here is because they speak English and it's the closest European country. Like, I just think it was geographically like a thing. But the Germans have had professional football for a long time. Some, like, it's not very well paid. And I mean, they might have to go out and get another job to make ends meet, but they're still playing professional sport. And it's not at a great level, but it's still entertaining enough. And there is another variant of that now. So I
still remember NFL Europe from when I was a kid. So, and I remember that the German team was my favorite because of the logo or whatever, because I was 9 or whatever it was. But yeah, it's been, American football in Europe has been attempted once or twice in the past on some kind of, and I believe we're getting a professional game, an NFL game in Munich this year, aren't we?
Yeah.
Chiefs.
So,
yeah, Max said that he's definitely going to go to that.
Well, you say definitely, but they had 1.5 million people in the queue for an 80,000-seater arena. So good luck with that.
There's going to be a black market for those tickets for sure.
Oh, yeah. I think it went straight on at $5,000 on the resale sites after the sale finished. It's just rough. Yeah.
That is insane.
Is it Tampa Bay that's going to be in Munich?
Yeah, Tampa, Kansas, I think. Which is
I don't think it's going to be Kansas, because Kansas was his favorite team, and he was really bummed that it wasn't them.
Munich. NFL.
Of course he would be a Chiefs fan.
Oh, it's Seahawks. Sorry, Seahawks. Bucks.
Oh, those poor Germans.
Yeah.
Hey, you export Tom Brady to a market, you'll be fine.
It's true. I mean, that should be Tom Brady absolutely eviscerating that poor squad. So, who doesn't want to pay $5,000 for Tom Brady versus Drew Lock?
Oh, it won't be Drew Lock. Drew Lock will not be the starter of that football team.
Interesting.
No
I
way.
can't wait to talk to some of the stuff about you because, like when I've listened to you guys, the core group of your show is as up to date and well read on what's going on with like local Detroit football than any group of people that I've come across, so it's
Thanks, man.
yeah. I like it because it's you have a gentleman on your program named Tom who I ended up agreeing with a lot of what he said leading up to the draft. And so when I was listening to the, let's call it the tennis match back and forth between like the ideas of like what should happen with the Lions draft, I remember thinking like, is there really any difference between what these guys are saying and like the nationally syndicated podcasts that I listen to? Because I can't really tell at this point. If you can't tell, it might as well not be, right? So yeah, I've really enjoyed some of the back and forth that you guys have. It's really intelligent conversation.
It was one of the things, actually, just one comment that stuck out in the little feedback form we did is someone said, and it might have been you, Drew, if you answered it, I don't know. But someone said, I love the fact that you guys don't agree on pretty much everything and you talk it out. And so there are plenty of us who do have the same opinion as the national media, but then there's plenty of us that don't, and who it is changes depending on what the subject is. And that's really great because then we can talk from the national side and have a devil's advocate. And we've all come there separately. It's not like we have a group meeting and go, so what do we think on this? Like, we just talk it out. And yeah, I love it. We just, sometimes some of the takes that some people have are so moronic to me. I just do not understand how they've come to that decision. But I won't tell them that. Not to their face. No. Anyway.
That's probably where you and I are different people. So
Geno Smith. Geno Smith is 100% winning over Drew Lock. Just want to say that now.
Interesting. I can't wait. So what do we know what week the game in Munich is?
I can find out very quickly.
I think it's kind of mid-season, but I don't remember.
Because I would be, not that like I have anything. I don't have a horse in this race, so to speak, between like the starting QB for the Seattle Seahawks.
November 13th.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what, week 11, 12, something like that.
No, really? That early?
Is it?
No, sorry, that late. That's what I meant.
September, October, November.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Well,
maybe
just trying to think. So,
it's before Thanksgiving.
Yep. But isn't that week 12? Isn't Thanksgiving week 12?
Yeah, it is. But week 12, Thanksgiving would be 2 weeks after that. So I reckon.
Oh, okay. 10. So it's like 9 or 10. Sure. Well, all right.
Sorry, it was closer than I thought. I'm looking forward to the Seahawks winning that game.
That would be pretty awesome.
It's not too often that I'm stunned into not knowing what to say, and that one did it.
So I'll say this. I think the Seahawks' offensive line is probably not as bad as people think it's going to be. A lot of people have them as like a bottom 3 unit, and I just don't think they'll be quite that bad. But also, when you've got Rashad Penny, who destroyed us last year, but destroyed a lot of people, and then you add Kenneth Walker to that, and you've got DK, and you've got Tyler, and you've got Noah Fant, that offense, as long as the offensive line can just hold up a bit, they've got a shot. And sure, the Bucs are probably the best side in the NFC by roster, but you know what? Both teams have got to travel a long way, and that's going to be a bit of an equalizer. And the Tampa have had their injury problems in the last few years. It obliterated them last year. And I mean, maybe that's a systemic problem. I don't know. It's just one of those games I can kind of people see writing off, and I think it will be closer than people think. I'm not actually saying the Seahawks will win, but I think it'll be closer.
Okay. And see that right there, Mike, this is a great example of like why I respect Matt as much as I do, is that he gave a reason. He had it well supported, and then he was like, and then he kind of drew back to the middle right there at the end. So he was like, "Oh no, when Seattle wins that game in Munich, there's people like," and then he's like, they're not as bad as everyone says, and there's like both teams have to travel. It's all good. I'm Tampa probably wins.
It could happen. It went from when to it could happen.
Yeah, it's not going to be 41-0. So. See, that's what I like about watching your show, is that it's just like, here's my opinion, and now I'm going to draw it back to a middle ground where everybody can kind of have a discussion, and it's not just like, well, you're stupid, whoever can say fuck you first wins, so so
oh man
yeah, and I get to be the one with the off takes and devil's advocate for Drew, so
which you do extremely well.
I do,
and I appreciate, which I probably don't say enough. So
we'll get to DJ Hawkinson at some point, right?
Oh God.
Oh yeah, we've had a lot of argument about him on our show. The splits opinion.
Well, let's get into it then. Let's talk a little bit about the Lions specifically. So, like, when I watched your channel, Matt, you had an episode dedicated to quote unquote drinking the Kool-Aid, like the upside, the optimism. I think it was the episode where you guys went through and did your predictions for the schedule that had come out.
Yeah, but
what did you guys end up getting to? Yeah, what did you guys end up having the Lions record this year being on that show?
On that show. So to be clear, it wasn't just Kool-Aid chugging. This was like, what happened if every single game went as well as it possibly could?
17-0, right? I mean,
I think we decided that there were. Oh, I need to actually have a look at our schedule. I think I landed on 14-3 in like a crazy optimistic world. I think I decided that if we'd done that well and Green Bay actually had something to lose at Lambeau in Week 18, that we couldn't win that game. The only reason we seem to win in Lambeau every single year is because they've locked up the one. They don't care, and we're really bad, but we'd love to beat them. Right. So then we, roll out the kicker to throw a touchdown.
Last year's win, right? So
yeah. Hey, that win was far more impressive than people thought, because Rodgers played for a half, and not actually that many people were rested for the first half of the game, and we beat them in that first half of the game. So it's not like it was given to us on a plate. But I think if I'm going to tone it down from the Kool-Aid chugging sort of where can we be, I have no idea what's happening this season. Like, none. And that's not very interesting for a podcast where you're meant to be informed. It's an informed take, which has kind of come back to I know nothing. So the reason for that is Jared Goff showed two sides of himself, and some of that was schematic, some of that was all the other players around him, some of that was coaching, and some of that was just him. So which Goff comes out of the woodwork, he now has the ability to be good or bad. And so the floor that the Lions have is really low, like really low. If Goff, he doesn't have to get injured for the Lions to be bad. Like, if he just spins into sacks and the offensive line just is good, but just not as good as we're hoping it's going to be. It's top 15 rather than top 5,
Right.
And he just doesn't help himself. And maybe the chemistry with the receivers doesn't develop until week 7. Like, if you said to me, him and DJ Chark doesn't really work, and then Jameson comes back and we try and fit him into, and that takes a few weeks to develop, and and then there's a couple of injuries, and that doesn't help too, that we could win 3 games again. We definitely could win 3 games. But on a realistic viewpoint too, if you're going to take that rough side of it, the way that he looked in the final 6 games was exceptional. And the chemistry he had with Amon-Ra kind of carried us to a few really impressive wins. Like, watching some games back, especially the Arizona game, but also just the way we handled ourselves in that final period, which, the most recent history is also the most reliable history we have. The last 6 games are the most recent 6 games, and hopefully that's what we're going to get again. So if Goff plays like that, and with a better organization now in terms of, I think we got the right coaches in place, the changes we made, although few, are really impressive. The schematic changes I'm convinced are going to work, and the personnel changes are going to work. It doesn't take more than our defense just overperforming slightly to get to 11 wins. I really think that's possible. So my range of outcomes is kind of like between 3 and 12, with an average season being maybe 7.5, 8 wins. That's where I'm at with this team. But trying to narrow it down is a fool's errand here, because there's just so many different things that could happen. Like, what happens if Aaron Glenn makes his defense hum? Like, you can't tell me that Melifonwu is going to be just average this year, because his range of outcomes is massive. And what happens if he turns into a really good safety? Like, that could transform this team. And that's just one player, but Deshaun Elliott could stay healthy for a full season. And what's that going to do for us? Like, there's so many things that could happen. This defense could be really good, like really good, but you just can't bank on it. And it's probably going to be bad, but we don't know that. So,
yeah, as much as I like to say, you know, history, what's happened in the past doesn't dictate what's going to happen in the future. You know, for us, we point to the Chicago Cubs that went 110 years between World Series. Just because they haven't won in a century doesn't mean they're not going to win, kind of thing. The history of our defense is not great. We've been historically bad many times.
Yeah, and the one season, everyone goes about the one season it was good. The one season it was good. Stafford
1 year
was not as good.
Number 2.
Yeah.
And even with that, our average rank, I think, was 24th or 26th in the league, including that number 2 that really kind of skewed our average rankings. We've been bad. So what about the defense this year, you think, that is going to change that? Is it a guy like Hutch coming in, or is it Okuda getting healthy and doing what he wants to do? Is it the DC?
Yeah, I think, I mean, is it easy to say all of them? I mean, Okuda is stacking good off seasons, and I think that can't be underrated. A lot of people have written him off, but he was earning rave reviews coming out of camp last year, and then he got really unfortunate to get injured in that first game. But he played an exceptional first game. Now, he got burned by Debo on one catch, which was really, really well covered for like 99% of the play. Like, Debo, that ball was massively underthrown, and he was exactly where he should have been if the ball was well thrown. So Debo made a great play and just beat a guy. You know, like, it's so hard for corners because no one really notices you if you do well, and if you're doing badly, you stick out like a sore thumb. I think he got dealt a bad rap for that one play, but I thought you played well otherwise. And if I just project that out, I mean, who knows what he can be? But I have hopes for Okuda. Hutch is obviously going to be a big part of it. I went to the OSU game around Thanksgiving. It was
wait. I
was in the big house.
OSU game.
Yeah, it was cool.
Well, I'm not typically jealous of people, but that game, I don't know. Okay, so the University of Michigan is my holy grail of football. Like, it's I would suffer 0-16 seasons from the Lions from now until forever if it meant the Michigan won the Big Ten title every year. So, and we have been, I grew up when it was 50-50 OSU and U of M. Like, we were programs on an equal standing.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the last 20 years of my life, they've absolutely owned the rivalry, and it sucks.
Yeah.
And when I watch every Michigan football game with my dad, and I have since I was a little kid. And he is as big of a fan as I am, and hates losing to Notre Dame more than OSU, but we both hate OSU.
Yeah.
But we both, well, me in particular, I was literally having a 3.5-hour nervous breakdown watching that game, and it was only when we were up by like 3 scores or around that when I was like, I feel a little bit comfortable to actually sit down and enjoy the game, because I mean, I love winning. I mean, but I hate losing.
Yeah. You hate losing more than you like winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was a terrific game to be at. And
just the emotion of it. Like, did you feel it inside your body?
Oh yeah. It was an electric atmosphere. It was so cool.
That is the best feeling.
So I came over for Thanksgiving. I went to the Bears game for Thanksgiving. Experienced my first American tailgate. Yeah. That was an interesting experience. It was with the Tub Thumpers. I don't know if you know who they are.
No, I think Chumbawamba had a song, I believe, called Tub Thumpers back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's about as close as I'm aware of the phenomenon.
Yeah, no, it's a few really well-known fans, and one of my podcast friends, Ryan Farden, not the Ryan that's normally on, but the London Ryan. He comes on during the season sometimes. He took me to meet all of those guys, and they have like a hot tub that they bring to a parking lot, and then they turn it on and they pour like
as one
some
does
sort of blue liquid, and you kind of bathe in the Kool-Aid. It's quite fun.
Ugh.
And having a proper Thanksgiving dinner at like 9 a.m. is really weird, but it was fine. And I was getting fed Fireball whiskey, like, just why don't you just put your head like this and we'll just pour it in at like 8-9 in the morning. I was an absolute mess all the way through that day, and it was a good game. Shame we couldn't pull that out. I thought we were going to win that for a while, but and that was on the Thursday, and then the Michigan OSU game was on the Saturday. And I was like, well, I'm already here, so why not just coincide those two things? Because it costs an arm and a leg to do the trip anyway, so one more game's not going to be so bad. It was on my way back, so
you're already ahead of that way.
Yeah. So it was $500 less to fly in from O'Hare than it was to fly to Detroit. So it was that paid for my rental car, and I drove from Chicago to Detroit, and as you know, Ann Arbor's on the way back. So there we go. And I think it was the 300th game with over 100,000 fans in attendance, which is insane. Like, it's a ridiculous record.
I remember my dad taking me to Michigan Stadium when I was a kid, and you go and you sit down, and I was like 11 years old, and I wasn't like as big as I am now by any stretch of the imagination, and the seats are like this big. Yeah. So you stand, or you become best friends with two complete strangers for the rest of the game, because you're going to be crushed up against them. Like, and oh man, that stadium is so much fun. It's so cool to me that you went to that game.
Yeah, it was $270. Like, it wasn't a cheap ticket, but There we go. And I actually went with a girl I know from Twitter who I met for the first time, called Rebecca, who you may know because she's a fairly well-known Lions fan on Twitter. Oh. And she is also an OSU fan. So that was an interesting experience. But it was, I mean, I don't know what the conversion is into Fahrenheit, but I think it was 30 odd degrees that game, minus 4 in my terms. Right. So freezing, Celsius. Snowing, and those seats are metal, right?
Yes, they are.
It was like you had to peel yourself off the seat and hope you weren't leaving skin behind. It was horrible. My feet are still cold now. But so Hutchinson was super impressive in that game. Ojabo and Hutchinson were both really impressive. But the whole defense
broke my heart when Ojabo got hurt.
Yeah, that was really sad. But that game had a few really big turning points because OSU were in the first half were really threatening, and there was a few goal line stands, getting off the field, only losing 3 points, or maybe making a turnover in the first half. I can't remember. And then from then on, second half, Michigan never looked like they were going to lose. Like, it was just, I think they had beaten OSU down. They wanted it more, and it was a really cool game to see. But so going back to the Lions defense, Hutchinson's a part of it. I'm higher on Hutchinson than a lot of people are. I don't think his ceiling is limited to 10 sacks. I really don't. Like, all these people going, 10 sacks would be a good season. And it's like, yeah, it would. 10 sacks would be a good season.
Yeah, it's good for anybody.
Yeah. But if you're talking about his ceiling as a pass rusher in the NFL, there's no reason why he can't be just one of the premier talents. He's got the work ethic that you need to succeed at that level in terms of the elite pass rushers. He could be the hardest working of all of them. And that's a good start. The motor, obviously, is something that you talk about, but he's so much more athletic than some people want to say he is. Now, getting round corners and bends, that's a thing, maybe, but speed to power is insane for him. So I'm really bullish on him. The reason that I'm really up on this team is I think that our run defense is going to improve massively. I think that the linebackers will be better than people think they're going to be. Now, that doesn't mean they'll be good, but people think they'll be like worse than the NFL bad, and I don't see it. I think that Chris Board is going to be a very good linebacker for us this year. I expect him to start. in this team. I don't think that Derek Barnes will beat him out. And I think Anzalone will be okay. He will be who he is, which is fine. And then through the season, I think Rodriguez and Barnes will start coming into the fold, and I think that will be interesting as well. I don't think Jared Davis will make the team. I'll say that too. But the interior
this is why I wanted Matt on the podcast today.
But the interior of the defensive line is going to stand up better than it has done. We took Levi as a project, and people want to write him off already. Levi was not the finished article. He was a player who played at 3 or 5 tech, playing at the nose at college. Like his arc was always going to be, let's be good in year 2. And they knew he was injured going into the season, but then he aggravated it, and then he was never healthy. And then it came out recently, that he couldn't sit down during team meetings pretty much all the way through the year. Like, that's horrible. Like, that's sort of John Pennicini type problems in terms of injuries, right? So hopefully that's not going to be a thing for him going forward. But the way he's jacked up, like when you have project players, when you have this building a team and they talk about culture and all that sort of stuff, most of the time it's just like putting something out there that's coach speak. You're like, oh, we're going to build culture because that's what you're meant to say. But if you have a look at all these players to a T, hard working is in their DNA. Like, what they mean by culture is these guys are going to work their ass off for each other, but for themselves too. They feel like they owe it to themselves to be the best versions of themselves. And that means that when you take a project player, if it doesn't work, it's just bad luck. Like, they're not going to leave anything else to chance. They're going to give themselves the best opportunity. And you see what Levi's done this offseason. It's absolutely fantastic what he's done. And then you've got Aleem next to him, who's going to be a really good run defender at the very least. But Levi and Aleem are going to provide good run defense with upside on pressure. Aleem can definitely get pressure because you see those twinkles toes first step that he can produce. And Levi was someone who got into the backfield very often. His finishing wasn't great at Washington. He didn't get nearly as many sacks as he should have done, but he got some sacks. And then Charles Harris on the other side. And I'm one of the biggest Romeo Okwara fans you will find. I really hope he comes back and does really well. I got his jersey, and I saw I got his jersey, and a Giants fan in London when we went to watch a game was blown away by the fact that a guy they cut as a UDFA has a jersey bought by a fan. But people are sleeping on Romeo. Like, people forget for how many games was it? For 19, 20 games, quite how good he was. I mean, when
I wish that those 19 or 20 games had been in a row, but like
they were in a row. They were in a row. Yeah. No, he had he had 3 games last year, and he had the full 16 game slate the year before, because I think it was 16 games.
That was his 10 sack season, right?
Yeah. So, but the 10 sack season, and in the first 3 games of last year, he was 4th in pressures through those 3 games. Like, fine, it's just 3 games, but it was a 10 sack season and then continuing to be really good. So the problem with him is you don't know how he's going to come back after his injury. Clearly, his injury is a worse one than the average Achilles problem. So is he going to come back and be the same guy?
Right.
Probably not. Like, if you're realistic, probably not. But if he can get near the same guy, he had gotten to a place where he was definitely someone. He had found that really sweet spot where most teams aren't going to double team him because they don't think he's quite good enough to be double teamed. So he's single teamed, but he's probably better than the man across from him. So he was getting loads of pressure because teams were leaving him one-on-one. If he was just a little bit better, you'd have to double team him and then maybe get pressure from somewhere else. He'd found that sort of sweet spot just to be good enough. I'm hopeful. with Romeo. But all across that defense, the coverage is going to be better. I'm convinced that the coverage is going to be better. Amani actually is starting to convince me he might be the guy. Like, I was on the brink of like wanting to cut him at the start of last year. Just because if you have him on crossing routes underneath, he's awful. Like, he's really bad. He doesn't have the speed to match up with any small guy in the slot. And so if you have him man on man on the outside, the guy motions inside of the slot receiver and then runs like a drag route and then runs up to post or something, or like a kind of, I can't remember what that route's called, where you kind of run across the formation and then run a post But yeah, he can't cover that. There are certain coverages that he's just bad at. But if he can make those number of interceptions, I don't care. That's fine. There's so much to be positive about on this defense that, you know what, it's so easy to say it's going to be bad. It's been bad for a long time. And you know what? If you think it's going to be bad, you're probably right. That's fine. But I choose to be optimistic. I think there's a lot to like here.
Good. All right. Excellent.
I always choose optimism as well. And Drew, we've had conversations about that in the past about my rose-colored glasses with the Lions. And
optimists are never unhappy.
I'd rather expect the best out of.
How is that true?
I would rather expect the best and have have positive like views going into a game of being a little bit disappointed than just having low expectations and being upset about my team and then because what to me, if I had this low expectation and we meet that expectation or we exceed, like, oh, we can't possibly win this game, then we go and win the game. To me, I don't feel great about that. I go, meh, we got lucky, right? It's all about like your mindset. So if your mindset to me is like kind of in that negative frame to begin with, when you do have something positive happen, you negativize it and say, all right, well, yeah, we just got lucky. And you don't take that positive and be happy about it. So I would, Drewster, what's up, bro?
Okay. Okay. So I hear what you're saying, and I believe that there are people out there that feel exactly the way you just described. Let me rephrase. So the reason I'm wearing a Ravens hat right now is that I have been hurt by the Lions since I was a little kid, as has every person who has been a Lions fan since the 1950s, right? So about a year before Martin May, I was thinking about this when I woke up today. When about a year before Martin Mayhew was fired, was when I was just like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't support this team with like my emotion and my dollars and all this other stuff. And I looked for another place to put those feelings, right? And so, and as you might have guessed, like the way I was talking about the University of Michigan, like I used to put so much like of my well-being and my mental state on whether or not the Detroit Lions would win or lose in a given week, that if they won, I was fine and I was a normal human being, and if they lost, I was just a bitch, you know. And so like it's you know, and that's not, I didn't like being that way, and they made me
hockey.
So like, yeah, exactly, right. So everyone has something like that, I would imagine, or something close to it. But the reason I have low expectations now for the Detroit Lions is not because I would say that I'm a pessimist. I am hopeful about this team, but I have low expectations for them solely based on the premise that like they have not shown that they are worthy of a higher set of expectations yet. So when Matt talks about like Onwuzurike or DeAndre Swift or any other player, like Jeff Okudah is another good example. Like those guys have come into training camp this year just absolutely jacked, ready to go, right? Like clearly putting in the time away from the season that's going to set them up for success during the season, right? Like that makes me hopeful. However, I have not seen that group of players yet go out onto a football field in meaningful NFL wins and losses games and beat opposing teams, or even in their matchups, consistently enough to warrant me saying I'm quite high on this player or this team or this season, because I haven't seen them do it yet. And so when they demonstrate that they are capable of playing at a level consistent with NFL winning franchises, I will come back and talk up and be positive and promote the kind of Kool-Aid drinking that you know we see from the fan base, regardless of what's going on. Like, I mean, there were people hopeful like when Patricia was around. There were fewer of them, but they were there, right? See, there's Matt owns up to it.
I was for the first year.
Yeah. See,
and then everybody's the second year because takes a year or whatever, and then after the second year, that third year, I'm just like,
the thing is, like, they had a plan. It's just the plan was bad. But we didn't know the plan was bad until maybe halfway through year 2. And then by the end of year 2, it's like, do you fire him? And it's like, might as well see it through. Like, okay, you got one more year of your plan. You've put everything in place. If we go away from this now, we'll be bad. And so if your plan doesn't work, we'll also be bad. So there's no difference. So we might as well give you it, because what's the alternative here? Like, the third year was inevitable, but the plan was bad. The thing that gave you hope was they said they were going to do something, and they did it. So, like, at least they said they followed through with what they were going to do. Like, I don't have any problems with that regime in terms of promising the world and not delivering, because what they did is they said, right, we are going to go after a smash mouth branch of football. We're going to value up players that other teams don't value highly, because we're going to play a different way. And we have seen that approach work with other teams. It's not like it's totally deluded. But the problem is, he ain't Bill Belichick. He just ain't. And what we're seeing from Bill right now is that he's an exceptional GM when it comes to having Brady on his team. And the thing about, is it Belichick and is it Brady? The reason that you can't separate them is more nuanced than people think it is. People wanted to come and play with Brady. Like, so much so that they would take a massive wage cut below market value to do so. And Belichick played that card with everyone, including Brady. He was like, people want to come and play with you, and they want to come and play with me. So take a wage cut. I can get the world's best team for a decade, but it relies on you. And then he used the Brady card with everyone else. And that was the genius of Belichick. And now he doesn't have that. He's merely a good GM now. But he was an exceptional GM for the time. Like, for me, that's what the roster management was the biggest thing. And I don't think it's nearly spoken about enough. And when it's gone now he spent $120 million in the record free agency that he did, and they almost all turned out bad. Like, that's not going to work, which gives me great hope for the Chicago Bears next year. Oh, my God. What an absolute dumpster fire of an organization that is. Oof. People think the Lions look bad in the last 10 years. You wait. They will be number 1, number 2 overall with Fields. And that's shocking.
Is Fields Joey Harrington?
No.
Like quality-wise, is he just going to be the guy they're going to get, put a bunch of money into, put a bunch of expectations into, and just not be that guy?
Well, Matt, do you mind if I take a first crack at this one? Real succinctly, if they continue to support him the way that they have shown under this new regime to support him, yes. But it's not because of a lack of talent on his part.
You think there was a lack of talent on Harrington's part?
Yes.
I mean, he was a pretty talented dude. I just think he was thrown into a dumpster fire.
Also, yes.
Ruined him. And then, like, he went to Miami and played okay. I mean, he wasn't an all-star, but, I mean, he was okay.
To me, you're top 8 or you're nothing. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, like, he's like, for Harrington, it's like Ryan Tannehill. He is a below-average quarterback. You stick him on a good team, he looks really great, especially a team tailored to what he does well.
Jared Goff.
Yeah, Jared Goff absolutely can be Ryan Tannehill. I think that's absolutely
possible. Aspire to be Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, that's why I think that Jared Goff probably isn't the guy. But there's like a 5% chance Goff is the guy. And with the money the way it is now, I'm okay with him staying around for one more year, because he could prove me wrong. He really could. But I just don't see a big chance of it. I see him being good enough for us to go to the playoffs this year. Because I just think the 7th seed this year will be 9-8 in the NFC.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be 8-9. The Draft Network did, they predicted every game in the last few weeks. And in their first draft of it, the Lions were the 7th seed at 8-9, beating the Saints on a tiebreaker. And then they changed it and tweaked it so the Saints won one more game. I was really bitter. But, like, that's possible. That's absolutely possible that we win 9 games and get it.
Yeah. Let me just clarify something you just said. When you said you're fine with Jared Goff for one more year, does that mean this upcoming season or a year after this upcoming season?
Oh, this season. This season only coming. People don't want to cut him because they're like, oh, but the financials are so much better the year after. And it's like, it's $5 million different.
Right.
Like, it's really
you
not
save
that
$20
big.
million, right?
So people forget about the ongoing cost when they talk about dead cap differences. Okay, you cut him this time next year, it's 10 million dead cap. You cut him the year afterwards, it's 5 million dead cap. It's like, oh, so the year afterward is obviously better. And it's like, no. It's a $20 million saving if you cut him this time next year. So you're saving 20 million to not pay him that money for a future time period. If you get 5 million dead cap, that's 5 million and the 30 million you paid him this year.
Right.
Like, you've got to take the whole thing as one thing. You can't just go 10 million, 5 million, 5 million good. Like, it's too simplistic. And it's not even like a hard point to understand, I don't think. But like 10 million dead cap, if that's all the dead cap we have, and it won't be because there'll be little bits and pieces here and there. But if it's just 10 million dead cap, we can live with that, especially if we have a rookie QB. Like, a rookie QB picked at, I mean, let's say Goff is bad. Let's say Goff is bad and we pick top 5 and we pick a QB. He's paid $9 million for the year. $9 million and $10 million dead cap is $20 million, which will rank 25th in the NFL or, I don't know, 20th in the NFL in terms of quarterback pay. And the disparity is so big, right? You have a veteran QB paid 25 million or more, or you have a rookie and they're not paid very much.
Matt, if you keep going, I'm going to straight up fall in love with you, okay? So,
I was just going to say, you are getting Drew turned on right now.
This is my speech. Please continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
I mean, no. But the thing is, there is room for Goff to be the guy. But I think that if Goff lights it on fire, looks like he did before, is enough of a facilitator to make it all work, the chemistry is there, I'm not going to say cut him at the end of this year because with all the new deals that are being done, the contract is good enough to carry on now. I wanted to say before, just cut him anyway. Even if he's good, I don't think it's worth it. Or trade him, or whatever you want to do. But the more deals that are being done at $45 million plus, $30 million, with the cap going up, is probably okay if he is good enough to carry on. And I'm kind of okay with that. It's not an ideal situation. I actually think that I'd rather re-sign him at the end of next year if he's proven to be good enough to keep him on the existing deal. I'd rather just say kind of like, right, let's keep the deal about the same. Let's give you some guaranteed money, lower the cap hit in the first year, and let's go and win a championship. If you're going to be the guy, why continue on the existing deal? Because it's a high cap hit, and we don't need to do it this way. Let's re-sign you, give you a similar amount of money, but a bit more guaranteed, and do it that way for 3 years. Don't even have to give you any more years, but we'll just give you a bit more in guarantees and lower the cap hit in year 1. That is far better than carrying on the existing deal and keeping him. So, like, cut him or extend him, but don't do the middle. Like, the middle's the worst place. But cut him. Yeah, I agree.
You had me right up until you said the possibility of extending him, which I almost threw up in my mouth.
If it's not any more of a commitment in terms of years than it is now, then there's no downside to the Lions.
I mean,
if this organization will keep him, that's the premise.
If you wanted to do like a restructure or something, to get the cap hit lower or something in an existing year, I could see that. But I certainly
that works too. Yeah, that works.
I just don't want to commit any more years to this guy where it's like it's financially responsible to keep you on the roster for X number of additional years, because I think we've talked about Jared Goff quite a bit on the podcast, and Mike and I think share our Venn diagram of opinion on Jared Goff overlays quite heavily. But I guess the other way to say that is that we agree about Jared Goff. But is that
sounds smarter by referring to
I know. Maybe that was too much. But my thing on Jared Goff is so let's take a look at Matthew Stafford here just real quickly. So like I was not a believer that Matthew Stafford could get over the hump. He did.
Ooh, okay.
So
that was where our main disagreement typically ended. Was
correct.
You were a believer, Mike.
Mike is the believer. Yeah.
Still am.
Yeah. Well, it's good because you have been vindicated in your belief. So Here's my thing. If you
I'm-
told
I'm,
me,
I'm not sure you have, but we'll get onto that.
sure. If you told me that Jared Goff had to go up and play against the quarterbacks that Matthew Stafford played this last season in the playoffs in order to win a Super Bowl, I don't think that he can do that. I don't think there is a 1 in 10 chance that he can go. Who did the Rams play last year in the playoffs, Mike? They played Tampa Bay. They played.
He retired Tom Brady
They played
for a few
the
days.
Cardinals. They played the Cardinals in the first round. They played Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay the second round.
San
They
Francisco.
played the Niners in the third round, and then the Bengals in the.
So that was Kyler Murray, Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo, and then Joe Burrow, right? So I would argue that 2 of those 4 guys are top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Burrow
Brady and Burrow.
Yes. I don't think that on his best day or his best month that Jared Goff can play any of those guys in that succession and win 4 straight games. I don't believe that it's capable. And I don't know that you can build a team that is so good around him to make up that difference. That's my problem with Jared Goff.
That's the way that. So it doesn't have to be the way that people approach it. I'm not going to tell people that's the way they have to approach the question. That's the way I approach the question. I would love to win a playoff game, but if you win a playoff game by being just good enough to win a playoff game, but you're sacrificing being bad enough to be good enough later to win the whole thing, I'd rather just try and win the whole thing. Like, that's what we're here to do, right? Winning a playoff game would be fantastic. It would be so good for the city to just win a playoff game, and they would celebrate it like it was a Super Bowl win. But let's just go and win the Super Bowl. So I agree with your take, in short. I think that's absolutely right. Apart from, do we think we can build a good enough team? So we know that Tampa Bay is falling off a cliff edge soon. We know that the Rams are built to win now and will fall off a cliff soon. We know that the Bengals have set themselves up actually really, really nicely.
God,
so
awesome.
They're probably going to be around for a while. Arizona are terrible. What other teams are going to be really good in the future?
So I think Philadelphia is going to be there.
Could reset with the quarterback, though.
You could. I mean, but like, how hard is that? They have multiple first-round picks, I believe, at least in this upcoming class.
Got 2, yeah. They traded down, didn't they, from the current year?
And so, like, they still stack their roster. They traded for A.J. Brown. You know, they are still in that, like, we're kicking the can down the road financially. But, like, if you took, I don't know, if you took Mac Jones or Justin Fields and put that player on that roster, wouldn't you be like, man, this NFC title game seems to be right around what we would think for them?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay, but so if we're talking about winning a Super Bowl and him being good enough, these teams are going to fall off, and then we're asking a similar question with those teams and whether the quarterback can overcome tearing that down.
Right.
So what we're talking about is we're talking about the GM here having 1, maybe 2 more off seasons to make additions to this team. Now, it remains to be seen on this class, but I think so far we're all fairly happy with what's happened so far. And
I'm stoked.
Yeah, me too. I don't want to speak for everyone. I think everyone agrees.
I'm happy to speak for everybody.
But yeah, so and the free agency periods, I know that some people were like, oh, we only won 3 games and we're re-signing most of the people. That doesn't seem like a good idea. But if you look at how we did last year with one of the worst teams in the NFL, and we were competitive in all but 2 games, I think. And we really ran a few people very, very close, including Baltimore, who I think a lot of people think is a really good team. Mm-hmm. I know there's a horrible ending, but like, we made them look ordinary. We did.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, but we were still a bad team. But we've taken the players that deserved it because they played well, and we've still cut some dead weight, and then we've improved through the draft. Like, I think that's a good 1-year thing to do. You aren't changing the world overnight here. If you don't re-sign those guys, you're having to bring someone in who doesn't know the scheme. You're having to overpay to do that because the contracts that have been handed out are very palatable. Mm-hmm. The alternative is, for me, far worse. So it's so easy to say this seems like a bad move, but you've got to consider the alternatives. And I just think if someone wants to come and play here, that's a good start, especially if we think they've got something. And like, who do we not want to re-sign from the guys that have been re-signed? You know, re-sign Charles Harris? Like, the guy did pretty well. He did fine. His run defense was actually far better than we thought it was going to be. And that was always the biggest concern with him was, okay, he's a speed rusher, and he wasn't a very good speed rusher. But his run defense was really bad. And like, if he starts, what are we going to do on that side? And then he was our highest graded D-line run defender last year. So, okay, so that's all right. Who else shouldn't have been re-signed? Maybe Anzalone, and he probably will be a starter. But like, if we could get someone better than him, we would have done it. So
let me ask you that then, because there were points in the offseason where I felt that the Detroit could have gone and not signed a market setting contract type of player, but signed what I would have considered to have been a veteran upgrade over a current starter. And they, and so you could argue that they did that with like DJ Chark, so I think that he was a economical, good upgrade. He's 25. He's fast. He's big. So I was a big fan of that signing. And then I would say that most of the signings outside of Chark were right around the same level of talent that currently existed on the franchise. But they were still resetting their cap, and so heading into this upcoming off season, they have not a ton of cap space still. They only have like 12 million, but that's because a bunch of Patricia draftees are getting their extensions kicking in. So if you're right though, and they let's say that after the season they cut Jared Goff, that frees up $20 million. That would give them, just off that one move, that would give them something like right around 35 million in order to go into free agency and just say, we're going to add a veteran who doesn't make mistakes, who's just a consummate professional at these two spots.
To give you another 10 million. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, and plus he played very poorly last season.
Yeah, he did.
And like, if he's here to be, so this is the kind of thing that I guess I'm a little bit worried about when it comes to the Brad Holmes era that we haven't really seen yet, is if you're going to reward a guy like, let's just use Michael Brockers, because he's a culture setter and he's a veteran presence, but he's not playing well. That's where I think this team could get into trouble if you're paying for like the locker room presence as opposed to the on-field performance. So let me ask you this, Matt, if you could, let's say the Lions go into the next offseason with like $30+ million, they cut Jared Goff. Is there one aspect of this team where you feel they should dedicate offseason resources to improving? And if so, where is that?
I mean, it depends what you mean by resources. I think running back's going to be a problem, but we'll see.
Okay.
But I don't want to dedicate resources to either because it's running back.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel the same about linebacker. Like, I do come from that sort of slightly PFF school of thought that linebacker doesn't matter just as much as running back does.
This guy's so great.
But the thing is, if I could bring in a Micah Parsons? No, Micah Parsons. Yeah, Micah Parsons. Well, I said Michael. That's really bad.
It's real close. Phonetically similar.
The thing is, he's a pass rusher, I think, rather than a Mike linebacker. I don't think he's going to be that guy. He could be that guy, but I could be proved wrong. How many good Mike linebackers are there in the league?
5.
Yeah, I think that might be high.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I think there might be like 3.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I think of linebackers now in 2 ways. You're either rushing the passer or you're primarily a coverage linebacker.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so, I'm looking at the list of all of the linebackers that have been signed in this offseason just to see if we could do better than we have done. Bobby Wagner, 5 years, $50 million. I don't think he'd come here. I think he was looking for a ring. But in theory, $10 million a year. Okay, maybe. We've got Olakun, who went to Jacksonville, $15 million a year for 3 years. Miles Jack, 2 for 16. But I don't think Miles Jack is like a massive upgrade on what we have. Like, it's an upgrade for sure, but is it a big upgrade? And how many more wins does that contribute for the amount of money
How
you're laying out.
meaningful is that, right?
So so I get so frustrated when I am listening to another group's like live stream or listening to or reading a Discord chat or something to that effect. And it's like, you know what we really need is we really need like a starting level Mike linebacker to run downhill and fill the gaps and, stuff the run and that kind of stuff. And then like we need a safety that can do effectively the same thing. And I'm like, no, that's more. I mean, like what we need is like Corey Littleton or like Blake Martinez in order to cover a running back or a tight end out of the backfield who is then all right at filling a gap, but like the reason your run defense is going to be better is because you've invested in your defensive line.
Yeah.
So like when I think about, and Mike and I, our last show was based upon like what does the next 2 years of roster turnover look like with this roster? And I'm starting to really wonder, like, where are the Lions going to, invest their draft capital in relation to like PFF's top 5 positions or what have you? Like tackle, fine. You have a quarterback, quote unquote, on the roster. You have 2 first-round picks. If one of them goes towards a quarterback, there's an investment there. You have an edge rusher in Aiden Hutchinson. Are you going to commit to a Romeo Okwara and a Charles Harris beyond their current deals? Like, or are you going to bring in a rookie to develop behind them until they bridge position players for whatever? And like, when are you going to, like, and Mike and I have had a dissenting opinion based on things like running back, tight end, how high are you going to invest in some of these positions, whether it's monetarily or with draft capital? And I'm like, all of these positions could stand an upgrade, but
yeah, it's hard.
How are you going to do it?
Well, so far they've put premium picks and premium positions.
Right.
That's great. Please do that. Continue to do that. I'm looking at, so linebacker, I think, is just the place where we need to go because it's the most obvious place for improvement. How much to spend is the question. The answer is not drafting someone here because we already said with linebackers, so few of them actually end up good. So probably not best to spend a draft pick there, especially because it's like tight end. It's a position that takes a long time to learn in the NFL. So if you want to be good and compete, drafting linebacker is a bad idea. So let's get a vet. And I'm looking through the list of all the people who are going to be available next offseason if they don't get re-signed. And one of those had their 5th-year option declined, who played at Michigan. And I really feel like there are people who can kind of be reclamated. So,
is this Bush?
Yeah, I think that could be a really interesting play because if you want someone who is super athletic, who can do a job and be better than players we currently have and might be willing to take
who's lived here before,
Michigan hometown discount sort of thing. Like if you could get him for like $6-7 million a year, I think that'd be really interesting.
Oh my God, I am all Twitter pated about this now. This is fantastic. So,
but yeah, where do you spend your money is such an interesting. It's a far more interesting question than most people get into in streams, for sure.
So, how do you respond with someone who says the following? Mm-hmm. I think that we need to spend the pick we get from the Rams this year on Noah Sewell from Oregon.
Isn't Anthony at home? Noah Sewell is which position and what year? How old?
Yeah, Noah Sewell is I believe a junior. He's going into his junior season at Oregon. He is a linebacker. He is the younger brother of Penei Sewell. He is largely considered to be a late 1st or early 2nd round linebacker prospect for the 2023 draft, and I believe a favorite of your friend Anthony.
He is. He's got. I mean, so the rankings are very varied at the moment with the big organizations. I've not done my tape watching so far for the upcoming class, but I think Pro Football Network have him at like 19 overall right now, and I think PFF might have him at like in the top 30s or something like that. So there's a bit of variation in there. I just said that I thought first round, well, at least spending draft capital at linebacker is not a great idea. But I don't think it's like the worst idea. I don't think it's as bad as you could do. Like, it's a not high bust, it's a high variance play. Like, how do I want to say this?
You're among friends, Matt. So go ahead.
No. But like, it's really hard to verbalize the feelings that you have for this. So
yeah,
I know how I feel about it, but how to say it is different. If it works, it has the power to completely change what we do as a defense. Like, if you do get the Mike linebacker who works, you can turn into one of the best defenses in the NFL.
The Keithley, the Urlachers.
Yeah, like the people who want to do it because that's the reason to do it, I get it 100%. And if it works, that's great. The chance of it working is low. That's why I don't want to do it, because I think so. Like, it was the Sewell versus Chase debate. Like, wide receivers are probably more valuable when they work, but there's a much higher bust rate with wide receivers than there are with tackles. And Sewell was one of the most highly rated tackles coming out of college, probably of all time. So Sewell's the smart play, Chase is the ballsy play, which has a much higher ceiling because wide receiver is more valuable than tackle. It at the elitist end of it, like, you won't hear people say very often that wide receiver is more valuable than tackle. And certainly in terms of money at the elite end, you started to see that happen now with the big deals coming up for wide receivers. But it never used to be the case that people value it that way. But it is true. But if you don't take into account bust rate, you're doing it wrong. And linebackers have a high bust rate. That's the problem. Like, if it works, it's fundamentally changing what we do. But it's not smart. It's not smart. But I get it. I definitely get it. Okay. It's the biggest problem to solve. It's just the problem that we'll probably not solve.
So with training camps going on right now, we're seeing injuries. Chase Young's got an ACL injury. Buck center Jensen. Season-ending knee injury. We've had a couple other injuries, at different teams. Other than, obviously, the quarterback's always like, what's going to happen if that guy goes down. But so other than Goff, like, which one person on the Lions team can we just absolutely not afford to lose without completely derailing our season and our potential, wins?
I mean, we've got enough wide receivers now that if one goes down, I think we're okay. So I wouldn't go there. I mean, I think you got to consider Hutch here, just because the lack of pass rush that we've had, we are banking on him being good so much. So that's one answer. But if you have a look at what happened with Goff when Decker was and wasn't in the team, I think I'll probably go there. He, in a confidence quarterback, someone he needs to step up in the pocket and be willing to take a hit, like Stafford did every single time. And he took the hits. But Goff has to be confident that the hit isn't coming. And you saw when Decker came back that he never span out of that pocket anymore. Like, and he got hit sometimes, but he trusted him. Yeah. And that's the biggest difference. Like, if you put Sewell at left tackle and you play Matt Nelson, Goff will play badly. I don't think that Goff will trust Nelson to be that guy. So, either tackle, but I think Decker is more important than Sewell right now.
I went back and I watched the first 5 games of last season from Detroit. And if I have to watch Jared Goff try and spin out of a sack one more time, it got to the point where I was just like throwing up in my mouth. It was so gross. Like, it's just like, I can't dance ballet or much other kinds of dances for that matter. But so I don't try it. Yet he's out there pirouetting, like he's Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray. And I'm just like, you got to stop, dude. Like, you need to take one step and rip it. Like, and maybe that's.
I mean, he's got a turning circle for pickup. Like,
yeah, he really does. And it's just like, maybe that's just me coming out of like a decade plus of Matthew Stafford just being an absolute beast when it comes to being a tough guy or what have you. But I think that's just part of the playing the position. And like, he's just not athletic. He is just a hair under being athletic enough to make those kinds of plays on a consistent basis.
Yeah. And it'll work once and I'll be floored. I'll be like, oh, that's just the coolest thing. Cause he actually made it work once.
Yeah.
Does that just go to the fact that we're not there yet? Like you look at the Bengals, right? If, outside of quarterback, what's one person that could really take them down? Clearly Jamar Chase, right? Like the good teams have at least somebody other than the quarterback that goes, we absolutely need this. This guy is a stud and he is a big defining piece of our team. And we don't really have that. And I guess that's probably just part of being a 3-win team last year and still rebuilding, right? Is we don't have the guy that's like, we absolutely can't lose them, lose them from the team for any length of time and still be the same team. Whereas the good ones do.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. We've got the depth right now, I think, to have a championship winning side, but we don't have the marquee players.
Yeah, it's been, to be honest, this is the first time that I can recall any kind of Lions team that even has, like, I would say that there's places like on our second line players that they could certainly upgrade and have them still be second line players. But the fact that there is a second line at all in any position group on this roster is something that I don't know that I can ever remember pointing to and being like, you know what, if this guy goes down, we have someone that can come in, and if Quentin Cephas is your 5th wide receiver or your 4th wide receiver, once Williams is back, I think that's probably pretty good, and like, I don't remember, I don't want to have to like go out and put a game on the line by having to rely on Quentin Cephas, but when it's him or person that you've never heard of before coming in off the street, I'd much rather have him than not. And like, I'm starting to, the thing that I was happy about with the way that they approach free agency is that they did sign a bunch of guys to like low cost, short deals, but they built depth off of that. Like that was the big step toward establishing some kind of like actual pecking order across a bunch of different position groups for this team. And like, I think that is going to help them a lot in this upcoming season, because they had a lot of injuries last year. You're always going to have them. Hopefully we don't have as many. And if that's the case with this improved depth, I think that the Lions, that's a win or two right there.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
I know Matt's got to bust out of here in like 7 minutes or less. So I do have to ask this question because you teased it earlier.
Oh, no.
Sure.
I got to know what your take is on Stafford, because Drew's like, oh, yeah, you stuck with him. You've been vindicated by the Super Bowl win. And you're like, were you? And I'm like, wait, what? So what is your take? I got to know.
So I think the premise of what the question is the important thing here. So is the question, can Matthew Stafford win a Super Bowl? Because that's been proven. But I think the knock on Stafford was always, you're going to struggle building a bad team from scratch around him to a good team and win a Super Bowl. People were saying, like, you can't build a Super Bowl winning team around Stafford. So let's go and build a Super Bowl winning team and then put Stafford into it. And that worked. So you've proven he can win one. Can you build one around him? And you'll never prove that now because he's on a team which is good enough to win. But I was always of the mindset that you could, and that our GMs were just bad. The executive owner made a bad choice of GM. The GM made a bad choice of head coach. And for 20, 30, 40 years, it's been that way. So, we never gave Stafford a real chance. Like, we had, the quarterback is allowed to have an off day. Like, in a playoff run, sometimes it just doesn't work. The genius of Tom Brady was that he had so many opportunities to have that run that even when he had a bad day, sometimes his team picks him up and they won anyway, and sometimes they didn't. They didn't win the Super Bowl every single year. They didn't, as much as they would like to. So Stafford had one bad day in the best team we've ever had, and now it's like, oh, we can't build a team around him. Even when we give him a good team, it was not enough. And it's like, if you had 3 years of that in a row, 4 years of that in a row, fine, you have a point. But we never gave him the chance, and we'll never know the answer to that question now. I'm convinced that he was good enough, and he's a guy that people are going to want to play for. So I think that you can convince people to come here. I think part of it was Detroit itself. People regarded Detroit in a certain way, don't want to come there. Taxes are better elsewhere. It's not a glamorous part of the country to come and live in terms of like, oh, you could play in Florida or California. Why would you want to come here? So like,
you got
winters? Yeah. And then you've got, do you want to come and play for William Clay Ford? Like, you add all of that together, and the GM already had a hard job. So it's not like I'm saying that they were.
It was Matt Millen.
In of themselves.
He was completely incompetent for a decade too.
Yeah. So there's lots of reasons why it didn't work. Stafford wasn't one of them. But did he prove the knock on him? I don't think he did, because you look at the way that LA went all in. Like they paid a second and a third round pick to get a player for half a season to make sure that they won. And then he went and signed a 6-year, $120 million deal with the Bills. So, when you go all in that hard, you have just a much better team than everyone else. They had the best team in the NFL last year. Last year. They had a better team than the Bucks, who did exactly the same thing the year before. So, if he didn't win it that year, he was never going to.
Yeah. Hall of Fame?
He's got a shot.
I think you have to. Any quarterback that wins a Super Bowl, you have to at least talk about it.
Yeah. But it was always the statistics without the accolades. Now he has the accolade and the statistics. I think he probably goes in, but maybe like 15 years after he's eligible, maybe. It will just take a while. If he
does
wins
it
one
again,
more, if he wins one more this year, then maybe, especially back to back, that would be huge.
Oh, yeah.
But he's going to retire soon. I really think he'll retire soon. I know he's just re-upped his deal and stuff, but with his wife having cancer and him having as many kids as he does and him just being like a family-orientated guy, I just can't see him playing more than 2 more seasons. I just don't. As much as he loves the game, you can see he loves the game. But go and take care of your wife, man. You've won now.
Yeah. Matt, this was the most fun I think I've had talking about football in a while. No offense, Mike. I love you.
Yeah, none taken. I don't know why I would be offended by that.
If we have another guest on the podcast, it is going to be a tough act to follow. So,
thanks,
well done, sir. Brilliant.
That was a good time. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. It's been fantastic to talk with you.
So go ahead and plug your stuff for everybody, the 5 people that are going to listen to this. Okay, go ahead.
Super simple. For All the Lions UK, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. There's some variant of the handle that rotl.uk or _UK, but if you search for the name, you'll find us wherever we are. So do come and listen twice a week in the season, once a week in the off season, then a special episode every now and again. There's 7 of us and a couple of writers as well who we might bring in every now and again. Some people only dip in for the season and stuff. That's fine. We're a tight-knit bunch. So yeah, come and join us.
It's a great watch. I've been watching for about 6 months periodically, especially around the draft, which is my favorite time of year.
Me too.
It's really worth it. So,
right on. Well, I appreciate it, Matt.
Cheers, Mike. Cheers, Drew. Fantastic
Thank
time.
you.
All right, we'll see you.
See you guys.
All right.